Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I moved in with my roommates about 6 months before all this happened. They were already married when I met them through a mutual friend who knew I needed a place. The rent was cheap, the apartment was clean, and they seemed nice enough. We split everything 3 ways, including the landline phone bill, which was pretty standard back then since cell phones were either non-existent or way too expensive for people like us. We got along well. They worked day shifts at a factory, and I worked evenings at a video rental store. Our schedules meant we didn't see each other constantly, which probably helped keep the peace. When we were all home together, we'd usually watch movies or play cards. Nothing fancy, just easy roommate stuff. That night we were all off work at the same time, which was rare. We'd ordered pizza, had a few beers, and were just hanging out. It was around 9 o'clock when the phone rang. My male roommate picked it up and said hello. We could hear a woman's voice on the other end, loud but not clear enough to understand. He apologized and told her she had the wrong number. The voice got louder. He pulled the phone away from his ear slightly and repeated that he didn't know the information she wanted and that she had the wrong number. The voice got even louder now. My female roommate and I exchanged looks. He told her no, he couldn't look anything up, that he didn't know what she was talking about, and that she had the wrong number. Then he said goodbye and hung up. He turned to us, shaking his head. He explained that some woman wanted information about the night school and had called here by mistake, but then she kept insisting he should know the number she actually wanted. She wanted him to look it up for her. Then she started asking him questions about the school like he worked there. My female roommate laughed and said that was weird. The phone rang again. He stared at it. His wife said one of us should get it. I didn't think we should, but I was curious. I wanted to see where this was going. I picked up the receiver. I said hello, and the woman immediately told me that was very rude. I asked what she meant. She asked if they knew I answered the phone this way. I told her I wasn't sure what she meant and that this was my home. She said not this again, that this was the night school and that she wanted information about classes. I explained that this still was in the night school and that she'd just spoken with my roommate. I told her she called the wrong number. She got excited and said she wanted to complain about him. She said he answered the phone the same way I did and that we were both very rude. She demanded to know our names. I told her I wasn't giving her our names, that this was our home and that we weren't who she was looking for. I asked her to please check the number and not call again. Then I hung up. My roommates were staring at me. I told them she thought this was the night school and wanted to complain about how we answered our own phone. The phone rang again. My female roommate grabbed it this time. She told the woman to look, that she had the wrong number, that this wasn't the night school, and gave her our actual phone number. She said she didn't know the number the woman wanted, but it wasn't the one she kept calling. The woman's voice was loud enough now that we could all hear her yelling. My roommate just set the phone down on the table without hanging up. She looked at us helplessly. Her husband got up and grabbed another soda from the fridge. I picked up the phone. I told her to listen, that this was a private residence, that she'd called an apartment, and that we were not the night school. I explained that we didn't know the number she actually needed, so she needed to look in a phone book and figure it out. I said we did not have the information she needed, and that we couldn't help her. She called me a little jerk and demanded I give her all our names. She insisted I give her the information she wanted about classes and tell her how to get in touch with my manager. She screamed that she would get me fired. I told her I didn't have a manager and that I wasn't telling her my name. I warned her that if she kept calling this number, I would report her for harassment. I suggested that if she didn't have a phone book, she should find one, look up the night school, and try putting their phone number in correctly. She asked who I thought I was talking to and started saying she would talk to my manager. I hung up before she could finish. The phone started ringing again almost immediately. We all just looked at it. My female roommate pulled out a deck of cards and we started playing. The phone kept ringing. After it stopped, we'd play a few hands, then it would start again. Eventually, my roommate turned off the answering machine so this woman couldn't leave messages. The ringing continued. After the third round of calls, I got up and turned the ringer off completely. We left it off for 2 days. When we finally turned it back on, I thought the whole thing was over. I was wrong. 2 days later, I was sleeping in after working a closing shift. My roommates were both at work. The phone woke me up around noon. I answered it half asleep. I mumbled hello, and the woman said she'd like to speak to a manager. Still groggy, I asked what she wanted and who she was. She repeated louder that she'd like to speak to a manager. I was still half asleep and confused. So without thinking, I told her I was a manager. She said good and that she'd like to complain about 3 employees. She started explaining that she'd tried to call the night school for information and that these 3 people were rude to her. It clicked. I suddenly realized who I was talking to. I interrupted her and said, "Oh no, sorry, that I wasn't a manager at the night school." She yelled that I'd said I was a manager. I clarified that I was a manager at Hollywood Video. She screamed asking what I meant. I explained that I was a manager at Hollywood Video, that this was my home, and that she'd called a private residence again. She hung up on me. The phone didn't ring again after that, not from her anyway. I told my roommates about it when they got home. We all had a good laugh. To this day, I wonder if she ever actually found the night school, or if she just kept screaming at random people who answered their phones. My dad works as some kind of supervisor at a company that handles fire alarm systems for hotels and restaurants. One of his clients is a hotel owner who's become a good friend over the years. Because of that connection, I get to use the hotel pool whenever I want. My family and up to 2 friends can come without being guests or paying anything. It's a sweet deal, especially during summer when the heat is unbearable. The temperature had been sitting above 30 degrees from 9 in the morning until 9 at night for days. I figured it was the perfect time to hit the pool with my girlfriend and my 2 best friends. I called the owner first to give him a heads up, and he told me to come whenever we wanted. We showed up around 2 in the afternoon, right when the sun was at its worst, but the water felt amazing. The pool area was pretty empty. There are 2 pools, one for kids that's about 90 centimeters to a meter deep, and an adult pool that goes from 240 to 400 centimeters deep in the center. The adult pool is massive, really deep and really cool. When we got there, only one woman was in the adult pool. She left about 5 minutes after we arrived. We set our stuff down on some chairs, and I went to the bar to grab sodas and sandwiches for everyone. We ate some of the food, drank some of the soda, but didn't finish everything. Then we headed to the pool. We didn't make a scene or anything. No jumping in, no yelling, no splashing around like idiots. We just walked in through the edge or used the ladder. The kids' pool only had 1 child in it, the one who'd been with that woman who left earlier. So basically the entire adult pool was ours. We'd been swimming for maybe 5 minutes when this entitled parent and her kid showed up. She walked up and asked if we could get out of the pool. I was confused and asked what the problem was, since we hadn't done anything wrong. She said we were taking too much space and her precious child couldn't swim. I looked at her kid. He was maybe 7 years old, way too young to be in the adult pool anyway. And the pool itself, 30 by 50 meters. There was more than enough space for everyone. I explained that the pool was huge and there was plenty of room. I also mentioned that her son shouldn't even be in the adult pool. She got angry and demanded that we leave immediately. Then her kid chimed in, telling us to just leave because this was their pool and the owner was his father. I know the owner and his entire family. These people definitely weren't part of it. I told her that wasn't true because I actually knew the owner and they weren't his family. That's when she bent down and splashed water at me like a toddler throwing a tantrum. My hair got wet even though I hadn't gone underwater yet. She laughed and asked if I was mad now that I was wet. I just stared at her. We were in a pool. There was water everywhere. What exactly was supposed to make me mad about getting wet in a pool? My girlfriend and friends were just as confused. We didn't say anything. She told us to get out again. I said no thanks and that I liked it where I was. She said she was going to report us to the lifeguard and walked off. She started talking to the lifeguard, obviously lying about what happened. The thing is, the lifeguard had heard the whole conversation from where he was sitting. He walked over to us and whispered that He'd take care of her because he knew what really went down. She stood off to the side looking smug like she'd already won. The lifeguard walked back to her and explained that we hadn't done anything wrong, and that there was more than enough space. He also told her that her child wasn't allowed in the adult pool. She got defensive and said her son was the best swimmer there and could be wherever he wanted. She didn't know what else to do, so she just started screaming that the lifeguard was hitting her and yelling for a manager. The bar employee came over. Turns out he was in charge of the pool area that day. He asked what was wrong. She accused the lifeguard of hitting her. Everyone around, including me, my girlfriend, my two friends, and the bar employee himself, immediately said that didn't happen. We all saw what actually went down. She called us all liars and said we were all going to jail. Then she looked directly at us and said that since we were rude to her, we had to give her our food and drinks as compensation. I told her that would only happen in her dreams. She got more upset and said I needed to respect my elders and that my behavior was unbelievable. The bar employee had already called the owner. He showed up pretty quickly and told her she needed to leave. She insisted that we'd hit her and her child. The kid backed her up and said we did. The owner said that wasn't what happened. He'd seen everything on the security cameras. He also mentioned that he saw her and her son weren't hotel guests and hadn't paid at the gate but had slipped through instead. Her face changed the second he mentioned cameras. She grabbed her kid and left without another word. The owner apologized to us and told the bar employee to bring us another set of sandwiches for free. We swam for another 15 minutes, got out, and finished all the food. We changed out of our swimsuits, grabbed our stuff, and thanked the owner and bar employee on our way out. I called my mom to come pick us up while we walked toward the parking lot. That's when we saw her again. She was waiting for us. She yelled that we'd stolen her things and lied about everything. She demanded we give her stuff back. She lunged for the bag I was carrying, the one with everyone's towels and swimsuits. I work out pretty regularly, so I'm stronger than she is. She couldn't get the bag from me no matter how hard she tried. She started screaming again, yelling that we shouldn't hit her and that she was calling the police. My girlfriend had slipped away without me noticing and brought the owner back. He said she wasn't calling anyone. He was the one calling the police for lying and harassment. He told us to go and that he'd take care of her. We walked to where my mom was parked. She was on the other side of the lot and hadn't heard anything. She drove us back to my place where we hung out for a bit before my friends left. Later that day, completely by coincidence, my dad had a meeting with the owner to talk about upgrading the fire alarm system. The owner told him everything that happened. When my dad got home, he explained that after we left, the owner called the police. They ran an ID check and a breathalyzer test on the woman. She got arrested for fleeing a crime scene, drug distribution, being 0.10% drunk in a public place, and a bunch of other stuff my dad didn't bother remembering. We all had a good laugh about it. I told my friends, and they cracked up for a few minutes straight. I'll be honest, my relationship with kids has always been pretty straightforward. My wife and I don't want any of our own, but we're not the type to lose our minds if there's a toddler nearby. If they're not shrieking like they're auditioning for a horror movie, we can handle being in the same room. That's why what happened with my stepfamily caught me so off guard. I got along with most of them for years, but my stepsister turned into this nightmare of a parent who somehow managed to poison everyone else's parenting too. The whole mess started about 18 months before I finally got my revenge. My dad called me up that January with what seemed like a reasonable suggestion. Our family Christmas parties had gotten huge, and he thought we should skip a generation with gifts to make things easier on everyone's wallets. Made sense to me. I was barely scraping by trying to run my own business while training as a heavyweight mixed martial artist. My wife was working on her second master's degree. Money was tight enough that we were counting pennies to make rent some months. I told my dad we could do names from a hat, keep it simple, but no, he wanted to spoil all his grandchildren personally. Fine, I said. I'd chip in for my grandmother's cruise and buy gifts for my step-siblings, but nothing fancy. He agreed. Fast forward to that Christmas party. I was 28, technically a small-time athlete with a day job as a strength coach, working my butt off just to afford training full-time. My stepsister was in her early 40s, one of those parents who made hovering over her kids her entire personality after her looks started fading. Her oldest daughter was 12 and already the most vapid stereotype of a teenager you could imagine. Her son was 9 years old and proof that jerks come in all ages. My stepbrother was 36, used to be a cool guy before his kids were born and he just gave up on everything. His daughter was 6, sweet and shy and honestly terrified of me because of my size. Smart kid. His son was 7, generally nice but starting to turn mean because everyone kept telling him to act more like my stepsister's awful son. The 6-year-old had brought her Nintendo DS, and all 4 kids were crowded around it fighting to see the screen. I made the stupid mistake of offering to loan them my DS so they could split into 2 groups. The girls paired off, the boys paired off. Everyone seemed happy. I figured I'd escaped kid duty, so I headed to the living room to pour myself a drink. That's when I heard it. When you train fighters for a living, you know the sound of someone getting hit. I suggested to my stepbrother that he might want to check on his kid, but he'd stopped caring about anything 7 years ago. He waved me off. I walked into the kids' room and found my stepsister's 9-year-old son beating the absolute hell out of my stepbrother's 7-year-old. This kid was talented, I'll give him that. He was punching, shoving the smaller boy into the wall and kicking him all at the same time while trying to play my DS with his free hand. Apparently, his turn started the second I left the room. Meanwhile, the 12-year-old girl had just ripped the other DS away from the 6-year-old, who was now crying in the corner. I shouted for my stepsister and told her she had until I counted to 10 to get in here and handle her kids, or I would have a conversation with them myself. She showed up, separated them, and I took my DS back. But here's the kicker. Instead of disciplining her son for beating up another kid, she went off on my stepbrother's 7-year-old for not just handing over the DS and making her precious angel look bad. The 12-year-old just sighed like a bored teenager and tossed the other DS at the still crying 6-year-old. I left the party right then, thanking every deity I could think of that I didn't have to buy presents for those little monsters. 6 months later, my stepbrother called me. He started off by saying he really appreciated the gifts last year, but then suggested I should get something for the kids this year instead. He reminded me that Christmas is all about the children. I told him no thanks. I explained that I show up to hang out with him and Dad and Grandma, and that I don't care about the kids. He said that was mean and asked if I didn't care about his kids at all. I reminded him that he cared so much about them that he couldn't even break up a fight where his son was getting beaten bloody. He defended the situation by saying the 12-year-old is a good kid and that our sister said he just had a bad day. I pointed out that the kid was literally beating his child and that he didn't post pictures on social media for a week because of the bruises. I added that if that kid were an adult having that kind of bad day, I'd have convinced him to lay on the floor until the cops showed up. He then revealed that he and our stepsister had talked and they both think I should buy stuff for the kids next year instead of the adults. I said I was happy not to buy him anything, but that I definitely wasn't getting anything for our sister's little devils, especially when she encourages that behavior. He insisted that if I wasn't getting something for all the kids, I shouldn't get anything at all. It wasn't right if I didn't treat them equally. I agreed. Done. 2 weeks before Christmas, my dad emailed me links to various toys, mostly from Toys R Us. I called him to ask what was going on. I asked him what was up and mentioned I got his email. He explained those were gifts for the grandkids for Christmas. I told him that was cool if he was getting them that, and that I'd see them when they opened them. He clarified that the list was for me to get them. I reminded him that I don't buy for that generation, and that I already sent him my contribution to Grandma's cruise. He insisted I needed to get stuff for the kids and asked if I didn't want them to look up to me. I said not really, and asked what part of my life suggests I'm any kind of role model. I joked that he'd be better off telling them to grow up to be rock stars. He said that wasn't the point. Christmas is about the children. If I didn't get them this stuff, he wouldn't put my name on a card for Grandma. I pointed out that was messed up considering I already paid into that. He asked if I would get the stuff or not. I told him I guess my name isn't going on the card then, since this would cost me more than a month's rent. He told me to calm down and repeated that this is what they want. I said I'd get them something small. He said fine, just make it something they enjoy. I made him a bet. If what I got didn't put a giant smile on each of their faces, I'd buy him dinner at the steakhouse of his choice. He seemed pleased and said that was the spirit. Christmas came around. My wife and I showed up with 4 beautifully wrapped gifts for each kid. My dad assumed it was old dollar store stuff but looked approving when I placed everything under the tree. We suggested the kids open 1 present each before dinner to keep them occupied. Their parents loved the idea since it meant they could keep ignoring their kids and talking about them instead. My stepsister looked especially smug when she sent us to distribute the gifts. The kids started unwrapping. I got the camera ready, while my wife grabbed our coats. I stuck around just long enough to capture the big grins on each kid's face when they saw what they got. Less than 60 seconds later, the first blast from the air horn echoed down the hallway, where my wife and I were heading to the elevator. I have no idea how much of the bulk pack of silly string or the 36 rainbow packs of off-brand markers ended up on the walls, but they repainted the whole place the next month. I like to imagine the pile of slap bracelets ended up on the parents' wrists and legs when they tried to contain the chaos. Peak 80s fashion before Boxing Day. I never found out if they opened the rest of their presents. Everyone got a copy of each gift for fairness, plus a bunch of gross and mildly inappropriate temporary tattoos. In the confusion, nobody noticed us leaving. I'm certain at some point they found the pretty gold envelope addressed to the parents on the tree. Inside was a blank card with 1 note. This was a warning shot from off the top of my head. I got a whole year to get creative for next time. Merry Christmas. I never bought anyone that steak dinner. I enjoyed several more Christmases with my grandmother and dad until they passed. After that, I stopped seeing that side of the family completely. Nobody ever mentioned the incident or gifts for the kids again. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.